we're back. Sorry about that. We're probably at a higher bandwidth now. Are we at a higher bandwidth? So if you might notice some improvement in the picture. I think you're over here now. Can I have camera 3? Thank you. So anyway, we were talking about the stepping down of the bandwidth for radio and stepping back up and all that. I don't know. I think we were, I don't know what we were talking about.
Something about that.
So anyway, radio will come back. We consider that a useful and successful test. We'll be ready to go. I will say that there's one other thing, though. There's one other piece of hardware that we want to add to the mix, and that is it's called a broadcast delay, sometimes called a profanity delay.
Oh.
So we were kind of like this the whole 2 weeks, like, please don't call in and bomb us with something inappropriate or embarrassing or something like that. And luck held, nobody did that. But in, typically in broadcasting, that's not something you want to just take for granted. And so as successful as the hybrid was in mixing into the phone calls, it will, I don't know that we'll bring back radio before we have a broadcast delay.
And does that just delay it like a few seconds, so in case somebody does slip
it's
up or
really
anything?
interesting. Broadcast delays were invented about 1953, I think.
Oh, wow.
And they were it was extremely primitive, but it was extremely clever. So imagine 2 tape recorders physically set like 6 feet apart or 10 feet apart.
Okay.
And so the caller in 1953 would call into a radio station and would say, hi, I'm Joe, and then he'd say something nasty. And that was recorded, okay, but that wasn't put on the air. Now the tape, this long piece of tape with, I guess, a bunch of rollers, goes like 10 feet across the room and comes into a player, okay? And so you're like, basically through a mechanical process, you're like creating a 10-second gap in time.
Okay.
So he says something nasty over here, and you've got all the time, imagine that tape going across, you've got all this time to turn this one off, right?
Oh.
So pretty clever.
That is pretty smart.
Yeah, and it started to spread, I think by 57, other stations were trying, but that was the concept. I guess we could do that now. I don't really want to do that, but
Sounds like a hassle.
Well, but the digital modern broadcast delays start at about $3,500. So if there's anyone who wants to make a donation or donate for part of the cost of a broadcast delay, I think that having proven that we can take phone calls is one thing. Now creating that gap in time that we need, is the next thing that we think. It's the last thing I think that we need to insert into the mix.
Absolutely.
Everybody else has that, and I think we should have that too.
Yeah.
I will say one other thing real quickly about that, since you asked. The modern ones are really amazing because it's not so simple as just turning it off, and then I don't even know what they did once they turned it off. Then I guess they just counted to 10 and then started talking again. I don't know. But the modern ones, when you need to make that connection or that cut, I mean, not connection, when you make that cut in time, the modern ones start to just cut out that section, and then they manipulate the recording and stretch out the time until they can recover that gap.
Really?
Yeah. And it's all done digitally by, inserting like tiny little delays or stretching, but they apparently you can't really even tell that it's happening. So it's really, really cool. And that's why that's probably why it's $3,500 or $5,000 or whatever.
There are some very smart people made that.
Yeah. And it's really neat. So anyway, radio will be back when we find the right time, when we have a broadcast delay, and probably when we have a few sponsors, probably also.
Wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, wouldn't hurt. So anyway, thanks for everyone involved in that successful test. And here we are back with News at Noon. There's going to be we're going to move into a slight different direction with that too. We're going to have more hard news in the first block. Imagine three 20-minute blocks. The first block will be more hard news, as we've been doing. That's not a new thing. Ferry coverage and other political issues and other news. Second block will be the block where we interview business owners, nonprofits. We did a lot of that lately.
Mm-hmm.
More of that probably than I want to do. So we'll contain that to that 20-minute. And then the last 15 minutes or so will hopefully as many days as possible be live music or recently recorded like that morning. But hopefully, I really prefer live music. And the whole idea is, we kind of, if you look at that whole hour, it starts very strong, then kind of has this middle, like more relaxed, and then just ends on music. So you're just like, oh, yeah. I'm not all wired from news.
Like tapers out in a nice way.
Yeah, mellow. So we've got, obviously everybody knows there's a lot of musicians here. And we have a number of musicians who want to come. And we're going to actually change this staging area a little bit here so that we can do music easily without having to rearrange everything too much.
Cool.
So if you're a musician and you want to join us, give me a call or send me an email. We'd love to have you. So today, for I think most of the show and this entire week, you and I and perhaps some of your friends are going to talk about kind of what it's like to be a young adult in this day and age.
Oh boy, is that it?
We got you got a lot of explaining to do.
Oh yeah.
But I'll start by saying I'm a father of two in their low to mid 30s, and a grandparent, and like so many of us, I'm troubled and concerned and worried for kind of the world that we're turning over to our kids. And it's felt especially in Generation Z, also known as Zoomers. You're a Zoomer.
Is that another nickname for it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Did you know you're a Zoomer?
No.
Yeah. You don't like that?
I think I prefer Gen Z.
Okay, well, all right. You're a Zoomer, according to Forbes.
Oh, no.
But it's not that bad. But Zoomers were born between 1997 and 2007. So that's actually, as these generations go, that's kind of a short time span. And you were born 3 years into it. So you were born in 2000?
Yep, that's correct.
And I felt like over the weekend, like this was a good thing to talk about all week. And I think it's going to be an opportunity this week for people to hear what it's like from your perspective and your friend's perspective. And maybe there are things that, that parents and grandparents and neighbors and people that don't even know you, if you're aware of some of these things, maybe people can help in some way. I don't know. It just seems like the right thing to talk about. So, thank you, Jeremy. So I guess to get started, what's it like? What does it feel like? One of the things that in the reading that I've been doing is that stress. There's just kind of a stress.
Yeah, there is. There is and there isn't. Just like it's a complicated subject. But a lot of times it does kind of feel almost hopeless of just like, oh, you have all these problems coming your way. Good luck type of thing. Like with climate change and politics and kind of the way it feels like the world has been moving, it almost feels like you can't really do anything. However, something that took me a while to figure out is that that's not a very helpful way to look at it. If you just look at it for everything that's bad, if you're only looking for the bad, all you're going to see is the bad. You're not going to be able to see any silver linings or any solutions to the problem, or anything like that. So I think that that's kind of the number one kind of thing to think about is really mindset when it comes to this. And I know that a lot of my friends can have a hard time with the mindset just because it does kind of feel like it's burying you and you just want to sit and do nothing. And I know that I've fallen into that trap of like, oh, if I can't, like, what am I going to do about this? There's nothing I can do about any of these things, so why should I do anything? Which kind of just gets you back in that circle of, well, there's nothing to do, so do nothing.
How do you snap yourself out of that? How do you pull out of that?
That's a good question.
I mean, you personally.
Me personally, yeah. I don't know if I have an answer to that yet, because I don't think I am disciplined enough to just snap myself out of it. There are definitely times when I go back into that circle of just like, oh, there's not anything I can do, so I'm not going to do anything. But there are some days that I wake up and I'm like, oh, no, don't listen to that other voice in my head. Like, doing something is better than doing nothing. If you can't do everything, you might as well take at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
people may be wondering what in the world we're talking about. Let's give some examples. What is your expectation? And everybody's different. Some people have parents that have resources. Some people are in line for a house. But what is your feeling? What do you feel the odds are that you're going to be a homeowner anytime soon? Is that something you think about?
Frequently, actually. I had, when I was younger, I think when I was 17, I told my mom, I was like, I have a goal. My goal is to own at least one property, any type of property, house, land, anything like that, in the San Juans by the age of 25. And I still have some time to achieve that goal, but it's very daunting because everything is so expensive right now, and the cost of living is really high, and it also just feels like all of the houses that I could potentially purchase are going to people that have been working for significantly longer than I am. And so it kind of feels like if I do want to do that, it might be in my 30s by the time I actually have enough to purchase a house or to put a down payment on it, it feels like even, which I know is not necessarily true, but that's kind of how it feels currently.
Do you have any friends about your age who own a house yet?
Not that I know of. I have a few friends that own, or that own like a condo, but I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
None of my close friends own a house themselves.
That kind of counts. I think when I ask that question, I'm thinking mortgage. Something you own, whether it's a condo or a house. In that sense, it doesn't make that much difference. But I think you've got an idea of San Juan living and maybe a farm and some animals and a crop and
nice house on the west side.
Yeah, lake, a private pond, and
yeah.
I'm kidding, but the real focus there is a mortgage. If you can get into a mortgage, even on a condo, you're building equity.
Yeah.
You're participating in the growth of the value most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But at least you're not throwing your money away as a renter.
Yeah.
And that's the big leap that I think so many people. Of my two kids, one owns a house and the other does not. And I'm just trying over and over and over again, saying, please do this. Find a way to do this.
Yeah.
do a lot of your friends still, and it's somewhat age, but a lot of people instead put their money into a car, which is, a terrible investment. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, so just to try to give our audience an idea of the kinds of worries, climate.
Yeah, that one, I'll be honest, is one that I'm not as worried about it,
Okay.
as I think a lot of people are. Um, Trying to be careful with what I say here.
No, just say it.
Um,
Believe me, we've already covered a very wide range of opinions. So.
but I think the reason that why I'm a little less concerned with it is I have somewhat of like a horrible view of like the worst that's going to happen is the planet heats up like it has in previous times and then get colder, and the worst thing that happens is the human population dies, which is horrible.
Mass extinction.
Yeah, but that's happened many, many times throughout the history of the Earth.
Yeah.
And that's the worst, which, don't get me wrong, I love living. I do. I do not want to die anytime soon. But then the Earth will recover like it has so many times in the past.
I could see why you think that would be. You got to be careful to say that. I actually have the same opinion. We've never talked about this before, but
No, we haven't.
There's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of science that says that we are in now well into the 7th mass extinction event on this planet, and there's no guarantee that humans come out okay on the other side of this thing. Maybe.
No.
Maybe.
But humans are also very adaptable.
Yeah.
So.
And I think the thought is that technology will save us somehow. So we'll see. It hasn't worked yet. I mean, it hasn't stopped. I think we're up now 1.5 degrees. But wow, I know we're going to frustrate some people who aren't going to appreciate this. But there's an awful lot of people on this island who also think that way. It's just the way I see it. It's just,
yeah. And I think that's the way that I see it, just so I don't get too overwhelmed by it.
So you see yourself in this huge cosmic, continuum, right?
Yeah.
It's like you'd like to make it to the finish line. I think all of us would be like, this place is screwed by 2100. But and actually there's a very good chance. Hopefully you'll be around at 2100. So 2200.
That'd be great.
2200 maybe. Yeah. By the time you're 80, that'll maybe be half of a lifespan by then. I mean, they're on the cusp of so many breakthroughs.
Yeah.
That's one of the questions a lot of older people are asked. If you could live to 100 or 150, would you want to? It's like, I don't think I would.
I think 100 I would.
Yeah.
150, that's pushing it. 100 is already long.
Yeah. But it's like, it's usually asked of people who are already like, old and in my case, sick and just like, no, I don't want to live 70 more years like this or 80 more years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting, super wide angle view you have there. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's
Are you the only, do you have any friends that think that way?
Not.
The mass extinction solution?
None that I know of, because I really don't talk about that necessarily with my friends a bunch, which is kind of funny because a lot of my friends and I, kind of all of my friends, we're all like the greatest friends, and yet we all have very different, air quote, political views on a lot of situations, which I think is cool because it shows that, oh, your politics aren't all of you.
Right.
You could still be friends, even like two of my best friends, we have radically different views on so many
Do you have
topics.
any friends that
Um,
prefer socialism, that think socialism is the cure?
um, I'm gonna need a little clarification on what socialism
Yeah.
is.
As soon as I said that, he might not know what socialism is. Just socialized medicine, redistribution of wealth.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
it's a real flashpoint for capitalists and people who've made a lot of money. But I read in my reading this morning on this, I read that I think almost half of Gen Z has kind of socialist leanings.
Interesting.
Obamacare was considered kind of socialism. I think I think that's fair.
Okay.
You know, love it or hate it, it's probably
So
socialized medicine to some degree.
it's not quite capitalism.
It's
It
it's
is
it's
kind of.
you can have capitalism within socialism, but they are somewhat in opposition.
Okay.
Um, and then a lot of Americans make a jump into communism, and that's kind of a big jump. So there's like you consider socialism kind of maybe in the middle of that.
Okay.
This
Okay.
is super oversimplified,
Yeah.
but it is my impression, my understanding of it is that it's kind of a symptom of the loss of faith in capitalism among younger people
Gotcha.
because they don't see how they're going to get a house and they don't see. So the next one in trying to explain the worries of this generation is a job, a career. Um, a lot of people in your age group are a little bit pessimistic. A lot of them are doing gigs and freelance work. I know somebody on this island who is right in your age range and has 3 jobs. You have friends like that?
I do, and that's not uncommon. I would say a lot of people my age um, do have to work multiple jobs or work really hard to get in or to get a foot in the door at a lot of places. I've been fairly fortunate with kind of my passions and being like having a family that was like go after your passions, do what you love. If you sit in a cubicle and you hate it, don't do it. If you sit in a cubicle and you love it, great. Like that's for you. But don't do anything that you really just don't like, and don't force yourself. Like there's always those like I've always heard these sayings of like, oh, but it's work. Like you just do it to make money. And it's like, yeah, that is a way to look at it, but if you only look at it like that, then I feel like you're not going to be very happy.
Mm-hmm.
But so for me, like my outdoors, like my love of the outdoors,
Mm-hmm.
I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to have a relative career, seasonal career in that. But then also
Camp counselor.
camp counselor, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then also fortunate with theater. Currently now a little bit getting into that realm after graduating, which is really cool. Um, so I've been very fortunate. I do know a lot of other people though that um, are just like, oh, I'm just doing this job so I can get enough so I can move to this big city or move to where I actually want to live or get the actual job that I want to have.
Do you, another thing that is a super kind of outsized concern that a lot of older people don't really identify that with, we didn't necessarily go through it, and it actually extends even earlier than Gen Z, but student debt. Do you have student debt?
I do.
Student loan debt?
I do. I will. I won't say the exact number, but I am fairly fortunate compared to a lot of others. A lot of other people have a lot of
Like, what's the
student loan.
highest number you've heard?
200,000. Yeah,
For a 4-year degree? Or is that it's
that's more than
advanced
that's an advanced
master's?
advanced degree.
Yeah.
But
How old is the person that has $200,000 in debt?
um,
About.
this person, I think they're 23.
Wow.
Yeah, they're my age. Um,
There's your down payment on a house and plus some. I mean, that's half of what's, you can still find a few, well, I don't know how many $400,000 houses are left, but that's a lot of money.
yeah, which I have a fraction of that in student loans and student debt, but also if I wanted to, if I got 2 jobs this year, maybe a third, I could pay off all of my
Yeah.
student debt
So
this
you're
year.
you're in better shape than a lot of your contemporaries on that.
I am, and I feel very fortunate about that. Um,
But
yeah,
yeah, a lot of friends are trying to figure out how that's going to work. How do you pay that off and
Yeah.
get yourself into a house? And wow, that's a lot of money.
yeah,
And again, in trying to kind of paint this picture of where some people are hopeless, you have your hopeless days, but you found ways, and it sounds like you're not suffering quite as much as some of your friends in some of these categories, but you can
Yeah.
at least speak to them, speak to the problems. And
absolutely.
another worry would be Social Security. Do you have faith that there'll be Social Security money for you far off in the future when you want to retire?
Well, I think that that's interesting because for me, that's something that's like so like tangible that I can't fully grasp what that actually means. And I know that that means, or I know that there's that every time you get a paycheck and every time you do your taxes, they take a certain amount of the taxes and it goes towards the Social Security. And once you turn 59 and a half, 65.
Well, no, that date keeps getting pushed back.
Oh, does
They're
it?
pushing it back towards 70.
Oh, wow.
For me, it's 67, and I don't know what. But
Oh, okay.
no, they're pushing that with longer and longer lifespans, and just because of the
Gotcha.
economics, that date is being pushed. You don't get your if you take it today at 65, you'll get less. They'll trim some off because you're actually taking it too early at that point.
Okay. And so then at that point, it's kind of like
It's a
what I would
pension.
pension, yeah. And
Yeah.
you get it once a month, and it's kind of how you live, and it's kind of them repaying you for all the years
Right.
you worked and
In,
paid
the-
taxes.
in theory,
In theory, technically, kind of.
Mhm.
And so for me, that's something that's kind of it's so far away, and so
It's just abstract.
it is. So it's not something that like I can fully grasp. It's like, oh, yeah, I won't get money from the government. I'm not getting that now. Why would I?
Well,
So
you'll start to feel it. You might change when you get your first big full-time job and you see the amounts that are being deducted from your check.
Yeah,
You might even though you're far away from collecting. I mean, it sounds like you're nearly 50 years. By then, they might make it. You have to be 90 to retire, but
I made it to 100, guys. I get my pension.
there's nothing left.
So what are the why is the Social Security money going away, or why is that a theory? Is that fact? Is that
The government will tell you. The government prints a. It's an amazing thing. You can look up and see how much they actually have funding for your anticipated amount.
really?
Yeah, it's like the people calculating that. It's like, well, we didn't cause this, so we're just going to tell you plain, straight up.
Okay.
This is how much funding there is, and
Wow.
yeah. But why did this happen? Because the government spent more than a couple of reasons. The government spent more than it had, but to some extent, this money is segregated, and that was decided a long time ago that this should be segregated and kind of protected, kept in a separate pot.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that simply people are living way older than they were expected to live.
Oh.
So you keep paying and you paying, and it's like, okay, how can I say this nicely? This is when this is when we expected you to depart, and you're still here, and you look pretty good. So, we
Okay.
might be looking at the next 5, 10, 20 years, and the benefit keeps coming. Some pensions and private pools of money, 401ks, can be used up.
Mm-hmm.
but Social Security just keeps coming and coming and coming. The other, I think another cause I think economists would say is that with cost of living raises and things like that, there are people who, regardless of how long necessarily you live, that they got more back than they put in.
Gotcha.
So I'm, any economist who wants to come on this show and correct everything I just said, I'm in deep economic waters there, but that's kind of why, some of this is coming up short.
Yeah, and that's helpful to me because that's kind of I never really knew that,
Yeah.
and I had heard that like when I'm older, the Social Security is getting lower and getting smaller and might not be there, but I never understood why or fully kind of the implications of that.
Well, read up on it. Don't take my word for it.
I
But
will.
those are some of the kind of the concepts that are at work. But I think your real answer is it's not very important to you right now because it feels so far off.
Yeah,
And that,
and that might be a
get
dumb
that.
reason, but
No,
that's where it's
you
at
have
right now.
you have more to worry about right now, like getting a job and getting in a house and things like that. So, kind of in that vein, do you give any thought to? You hear about the national debt? You might not know the number right now is 34 trillion.
Well,
So
that's gone
kind
up.
of a big number.
That's gone up
It's
since
a bunch of zeros.
I think the last time I heard it, it was at like 21 trillion.
Well, I don't. Yeah.
So that was that must have been a while ago.
I guess you were on this planet when it was still 21. Yeah, 34 is the number right now,
Wow.
and it's if you chart it, it's on quite a steep curve right now, and I believe we spend 670 billion in just in interest payments to just have that kind of debt. And there are people who would say that's not a problem. It's okay to carry a national debt payment of $670 billion. I don't know.
Wow.
But I doubt that that's something that you worry too much about. Or do you?
I don't, and that's kind of along with the Social Security bit of it's so intangible and so far away and just such a huge number that it's kind of like how much actually is that, and how do we even begin to combat that and alleviate that?
Pay it down. I mean, I don't know if anybody has the answer to that. I think this might be one of those issues where your parents and grandparents worry more about it than you do at this time. I think I would imagine there will be a time, in every Zoomer's future. I'm going to tease you about that. Since now I know you don't like it, now I'm going to just call you a Zoomer all the time. But I think there might be a time when, when Zoomers are going to have to deal with that, and I don't know what that'll mean. I mean, if this curve keeps going, it's going to get your attention at some point.
So here's probably a naive question, but how would it how would it affect me?
Well, for one thing, when the government borrows that much money, they kind of hog a lot of the capital, and that kind of borrowing can also push interest rates up. And again, so Jeremy, we need to find an economist. We need to book an economist on this show to answer some of Matthew's questions. But
That'd be helpful.
yeah, but
I was not a math major.
the debt kind of cascades throughout our economy, and it is this abstraction. It's just like numbers and concepts and theories, and yet it does might find a way to filter down into people's lives.
Yeah.
But I'm here to talk today about just what your life is like and what you worry about, and these hopeless moments that you have. What's driving that. But anyway, that's I think 4 or 5 things we just touched on that bother a lot of people in this age group. In your case, if we talked about 5 or 6, 2 of them are not really front and center for you.
Yeah.
You've got a very interesting macro view on the climate,
Yeah, I know a lot of people aren't going to necessarily agree with that one, but
Well, yeah. And then there's the whole thing about World War III, which did you ever think, do your friends worry about war?
uh, th- I don't know if that's something we've ever actually really discussed. I
Well,
know I in my mind I've always thought about like World War III and what that would look like and um, how potentially like a lot of the citizens could get dragged into it if the
sure.
draft happens and
Yeah.
everything like that, especially with all like the young men if they want to get loans from the government, you have to have a service number
Yep. Do
and
you have
stuff.
one?
I do. Hmm.
Yeah. I didn't. I was in this, not to get it, it's not about me, but when I was really little, we had a lot of awareness about the possibility of World War III.
Mm.
And it kind of skipped over just a war into like the end of time, the end of
Hmm.
humanity. We were doing air raid shelter drills in grade school. We were still hearing occasional mentions of thermonuclear war and annihilation
Wow.
and all that stuff. And it really subsided. In the 80s were pretty quiet, and the 90s were really quiet, except for some hot spots around the world, and they felt, and it just kind of receded. There was, in that time period, there was a lot of disarmament, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
shrinking of nuclear stockpiles. And I can't think of exactly when it turned, but now it's back. All that worry is back, and China and Russia and Iran and the Middle East, and I think people of all ages are now getting concerned again.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this long, like 20, 25-year period, especially in 1989 when if you've ever heard mentioned the fall of the Berlin Wall,
Yeah.
and and at that point, then at the same time, the disintegration of the Soviet Union, and
Mm-hmm.
all that was left really was Russia, and everybody else was like, "We're done with this,"
Yeah.
and even Russia was done with it for a brief time, and that was probably the zenith of, we don't have to worry. We're gonna, things are gonna be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, from '89 to, and it was still, as I said, very quiet in the '90s, kind of very optimistic, especially the first half of the '90s. And then all that stuff started to come back. And I guess, with 9/11, it was all just right back in our face. Like, oh my God, a
Yeah.
whole chunk of the world hates us this much.
Yeah.
It,
I'm trying to think about like how if World War One and World War Two left millions upon millions of people dead, and that was compared to the technology and the weaponry we have today, and they were still able to do that much
oh yeah,
damage and
yeah,
carnage.
yeah.
It's like if World War Three happens, like at what extent are they gonna stop and realize that the planet and instead of just
No
killing
one knows.
everyone.
No one knows. No one knows this. There's no
So,
answer. There is no answer. It's
no,
it's
there
a,
isn't.
it's literally the definition of an existential question. Is literally whether we exist or not as a race.
Yep.
And last thing I'll say on that is, all through the '60s and '70s, and really all the way right up to today, in some ways, there was this thing called policy called MAD. It stood for Mutually Assured Destruction.
Oh.
So if I send a nuke your way, you're automatically going to send one my way. If I send 10 your way, you might send 10, you might send 100 my way. And we're all gone. And that was the MAD principle. And it still
Wow.
applies between nation states. That still works. Russia still knows that.
Mm-hmm.
China still knows that. We still know that. So we don't do that. The difference today is that in the '60s and '70s and beyond, where MAD worked, now you have smaller countries, you have groups that aren't even countries
Mm-hmm.
that are either have access or getting access who don't care about mutually assured destruction.
Yeah.
Bad. And that's what probably keeps some people up in Washington, D.C. up at night because,
Mm-hmm.
they just don't care. So there is no mad with them. It's like, I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. I don't care what you're going to do to me. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah. It becomes a different battle when your enemy
Yeah.
is not afraid of death.
So, what kept that that stuff from ever being used for all those decades,
Mm-hmm.
and it only came into existence, in 1945. There was no such thing as these kind of powerful weapons.
Yeah.
But what that kept that kind of contained from 45 through, I don't know, 2001 maybe, was this mutually assured destruction concept. And that's not totally there anymore. And that's pretty scary. I don't want to give you, I've given you 3 new things to worry about on top of all the things. So sorry. This has been a very destructive show. Sorry about that. But no, I think it's revealing to kind of understand what your priorities are and what your worries are. A lot of your, I don't know about particularly your friends, but a lot of your cohorts, your age cohorts, are very stressed and very anxious. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I do. And for as much as I think about a lot of the problems, I feel like I'm also blessed in the way that I don't necessarily take them on as my own and get so attached to them that that's all I think about. And it's almost like that ignorance is bliss saying of I know enough that I'm not ignorant totally of the situation, but I'm also not just researching it and getting like I said at the very beginning of just looking for the bad in all of it. And
Right.
Yeah.
So what are you most optimistic about in life, in the world? What do you think we're getting right? Or do you think we're as a race we're getting better?
I think that there are a surprising amount of people that are starting to think not necessarily the way I think, but the way of, oh, it's not hopeless. Still, there are still plenty of people that do feel that way, and plenty of people that don't. But I also think that there are more people that are starting to, I'll use the word awaken, to they're like, oh, this isn't hopeless. There are steps to be made in the right direction, which I think is important.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I would like to continue this tomorrow, and we've got a little announcement to make. So thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow. And maybe
Thank you.
maybe we'll find one of your friends to talk with us too.
Hopefully.
I bet they don't completely say everything you said. I think you've got some really neat and some really unique ways to look at this. So this has been kind of inspiring. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, you ready? So I want to read a little announcement for a friend. As everyone knows, there's an enormous shortage of affordable housing on San Juan Island, and I just want to read this for a friend. After 3 years on Spring Street, David Messmer, who appears on CNL2 as a multi-instrumentalist, needs to downsize and needs a new space to live in and where he can continue his musical work. He needs to find a new home on San Juan Island. The home he's looking for can be primitive, but must have a bathroom. Got it. That's good. He's flexible.
He's got his priorities straight.
He'll accept primitive as long as there's a bathroom. Contact David at 360-375-0410. We'll put that number up tomorrow, and we'll try to put it up on the website today. 360-375-0410. If you know of an affordable home or cabin for rent, David thanks you. So if anyone knows, and I do know that there are places that come up on short notice, and they don't quite make it to the websites or the advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people want to know. Sometimes people want to rent to someone that's already been here.
Yeah.
So if there is a situation like that, it would be really nice. I'm going to read that phone number again: 360-375-0410. 360-375-0410. David Messmer, he's played the Hammond organ for us on these shows before. He played the, still here in the studio, he played he calls them the vibes, the vibraphone. A very musical guy, very fun to talk music with. He's just a walking encyclopedia, and he's a good person. So, David, we'll mention this each day this week so people, maybe can network a little bit and keep this excellent person on the island if possible.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
So I think we're done for the day. I also want to point out that there's still time, and Jeremy, is this on the website, the water taxi survey? If you look down our page a little bit on the stack of items, there is a QR code that would take you to a quick survey. The community water taxi people, I think, are only going to have this survey up for another week and a half. They are in the hunt for some serious money with the state to subsidize a community water taxi that gets you between the islands. I believe one of the boats was canceled this morning. We've had a string of good luck, but I think our luck ran out this morning when they had a crewing problem with one of the boats. These are the people, though, that are trying to fill that gap so people can get around. People can get from Orcas to Friday Harbor for chemotherapy, or get from one of the islands to Friday Harbor, or vice versa for a job.
Yeah.
When, unfortunately, Washington State Ferries doesn't do it, can't do it because of crewing issues.
Yeah.
Or mechanical breakdowns with these very much older boats that we have. So in the big picture, if you spend just a few minutes on this survey that Community Water Taxi is putting out, the QR code is on our page, and you will be helping the cause, and it won't cost you a nickel to share your opinion. But they need this data to go back to the state and work out the details, so that would be very helpful. It is a few minutes before 1. We're done for the day. Thank you for joining us, and have a great Monday. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This is All Blues by Miles Davis. It's been covered greatly. It's a tune in 6/8. It's not a waltz, but it's in 6, so you get that 3/4 feel.